everyone, it's Kristen. So for yesterday, we have this, which it's kind of hard to tell, but it's Abomination fighting Hulk. And just briefly about Abomination, he was in, of course, the 2008 Hulk movie. He was also briefly in Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings and in the She-Hulk TV series. Oh, goodness. You guys already know how I feel about that. It could have been so good. That's all I'm going to say. Anyway, so Emil Blonsky, he was a KGB agent who willingly subjected himself to gamma rays in order to become like the Hulk. And he actually kind of partnered with General Ross, who we just talked about, to try to defeat the Hulk. And at one point, they were kind of working together willingly, and then Ross planted a small bomb in the base of his skull and basically said, defeat the Hulk, fight him, or you die. But he ended up double-crossing Ross. And honestly, I mean, Abomination spends a lot of time in space. Like, he fights the Hulk, he always gets defeated, and he ends up in space a lot, like exiled to space. So I mean, he's pretty much like the Hulk. The angrier he gets, I think, like he's slower than Hulk. Whereas Hulk, the angrier he gets, the stronger he gets, faster he gets, that sort of thing. And the interesting thing about Abomination is he can breathe underwater, and he has scales. Which he kind of always makes me think of Chode from the Starjammers, because they're both big, like green reptilian scales. I don't know, in my mind, that's what I picture. Since I'm, of course, more familiar with Chode, because the X-Men. But anyway, that's just what I think of. Let's see. At one point, he actually turned back into human because this. He's a guy who is like way beyond the technology that he has is way beyond anything anyone else has, so it makes him seem like he's a sorcerer. His name's Tyrannus. He actually pushed himself into Abomination and pushed Emil out, and so he was human for a while. But then when Tyrannus was driven back out of Abomination, they put Emil Blonsky back in, and it drove him insane. He eventually got, more stable, but I mean, he was still, still after the Hulk. Hulk actually threw him into a vat of like toxic waste or something and scarred him, and that made, of course, Abomination even more resentful towards Hulk. And I mean, at one point, he kidnapped his ex-wife, Nadia, who wanted nothing to do with Blonsky now, obviously. He was protector of the sewer people of New York for a little while, and he killed police officers. He just, not the greatest person, not the greatest guy. He actually went on a rampage and destroyed towns and made it look like Hulk did it, and also was secretly poisoning Betty, General Ross's daughter. Sorry, I don't know why I blanked. And so, which of course he made it seem like Hulk was doing it, so Ross went after Hulk for those two things. Anyway, fought Hulk again, ejected in space again. Like I said, he spends a lot of time in space. It seems like it anyway. And then for Friday, today, we have Iron Man. And it just gives you like a brief little history of him, like how he became Iron Man. And so, the real reason I'm not like spending too much time on those characters is because, look, we have another X-Men character, yay! Okay, so I don't have a Cyclops shirt, I will be honest, so I wore another one of my Iceman shirts. Because, I will be honest, Cyclops has never been one of my favorites, because some of the choices that he's made, or the writers have had him make, are just not cool. Haven't really agreed with his choices, but yeah. Anyway, so we'll talk about that. So you can find this stamp in the Incredible Hulk 167, June 74. Also appears in Incredible Hulk number 80, 180, one before the introduction of Wolverine, October 74, and the Amazing Spider-Man number 146, July of 75. And this one is from X-Men number 39, December 67, art by George Tuska. The cover was also used as a source for MVS number 69. The end of the Dread Mutant Master, or of the X-Men. The fateful finale. So there you go. There's where they got that stamp from. Or his image. And pretty much, yeah, like I said, they usually just make the background simpler so that the character itself stands out more. Okay, so I'm going to try to make this, like, after what happened with Iceman and how long that video went on. I'm going to try to make this briefer. If that's not really a word, but you know what I mean. And we'll see how it goes, honestly. So, of course, he was the first official student of Xavier's. Xavier had contacted, other students before him, but he was the first one to officially join. Of course, his father was Corsair, but he didn't know that, when he first met him, he didn't know that he was Corsair, but he and his wife were flying home, and they had their kids with them, and what happened is that they were attacked by an alien aircraft, and so they only had the one parachute. They put Scott and Alex into this parachute and, pushed them out, and basically they thought their kids were dead. Scott and Alex thought their parents were dead, that sort of thing. So they grew up in an orphanage, and it was revealed later that the orphanage that Scott grew up in was run by Mr. Sinister, which is not a surprise because Sinister is obsessed with Scott and Jean and thinks that using their genetic material will create, like, the next evolution of mutants, like the perfect mutant. So, he's responsible for a lot of things in Cyclops and Jean's life. But anyway, so, orphanage, joined Xavier's. Jean was the last of the original 5 to officially join. He liked Jean from the start, and Jean liked him, but he didn't think that Jean would like him because she had, guys like Warren Worthington chasing her too. And he also was afraid that he would hurt her, with his powers and stuff. But eventually they did, get together. So, okay, so after Krakoa captured the original X-Men, he stayed, so did Jean, and then Havoc and Lorna Polaris joined, because, like I said, most of the other original X-Men left the team. So, of course, everyone knows about the story of the Phoenix Saga, and after Jean became Phoenix, Cyclops felt that she was different. She just wasn't the same, so they didn't date for a while. And then when he thought she was dead after Magneto's, base collapsed in this volcano, whatever, he kind of confesses to Storm, he doesn't feel like he thought he would feel, considering he was supposed to be in love with Jean. That was 114, which she, chastised him and stuff and said, if you don't feel that way, then you obviously never loved her. Something to that effect. They got back together around Uncanny X-Men 1. Oh, before they got back together, he did date Colleen Wing briefly, and yes, that Colleen Wing, who is most associated with Iron Fist and, Daughters of the Dragon. So they got back together in like 120, Uncanny X-Men 129, when they were fighting Proteus, or 128, 129, not exactly positive. When they were fighting Proteus, and yeah, they just realized that they really cared about each other, got back together, and then Jean died. After the Dark Phoenix saga, Jean died, supposedly. Um, so he left the X-Men because he was just devastated, because he had actually like proposed to Jean, psychically, and she accepted. And so yeah, he left the X-Men. He was devastated. He dated Lee Forrester for a while. She was the captain of the boat he was working on, because he was like, I need a change of pace. I need something totally different, away from the world of superheroing and mutants and stuff. So dated her for a while. He went back to the X-Men. He met Madeline Pryor, Maddie, in Uncanny X-Men 168, I believe. And then they got married in like 175, so they got married pretty quick. And of course, it's revealed later that she is a clone of Jean Grey made by Mr. Sinister. But of course Scott didn't know that. He knew, of course, that she looked a lot like Jean, and everyone else did too. And they thought, well, he's just marrying her because she does resemble Jean. And he's like, no, I really do love her. Even in spite the fact that she looks like Jean. Of course, I'm sure that contributed to part of it, for sure. So anyway, sorry, Dazzler was in the window and now she's out of the window. I don't know what she's doing now. So, yeah, and then like about 3 years later, Jean is found by the Fantastic Four in like Fantastic Four 286, at the bottom of the river in this cocoon, and it's revealed that she was never Phoenix. It was just Phoenix masquerading as her. And so when Cyclops realized that Jean is alive, he leaves Maddie and the baby because she's pregnant, and goes off to be with Jean. Like, doesn't tell Maddie, doesn't call her, doesn't anything, nothing. So when and Cyclops actually at some point fights Storm for leadership of the X-Men, Uncanny X-Men 201, and he loses, even though Storm doesn't have powers at that point, because she lost him after in Uncanny X-Men like 185, when Forge hits her, when she accidentally gets hit by the device that Forge made to remove powers. So he leaves the X-Men. Then he finds out Jean's alive, so he goes with her, and they form X Factor, who are supposedly mutant hunters, but really they help mutants. He forms X Factor with the original 5, and that's when first appearance of Apocalypse isn't an X Factor. Sorry, I was like, what am I trying to say? So let's see, where are we? Okay, and Maddie, unfortunately, she finds out about this. Like, some other people knew that Jean was back, of course, like Wolverine and Storm. Well, actually, no, he didn't tell Storm, so she found out later too. But Maddie found out by seeing a news broadcast of Cyclops and Jean in their X Factor uniforms standing next to each other, talking about, their team. I mean, what a devastating way to find out that your husband, who has just left you and the baby, and like not said anything at all, just all of a sudden disappears. How devastating is that? And so Maddie is pretty much crushed, which I don't blame her. Which, this is one of the reasons I don't like Cyclops, because he didn't even talk to Maddie or anything. And then, of course, when Jean is the one that encourages him to actually talk to her, but he believes she's dead, because this was Fall of the Mutants, where they sacrificed themselves, to save everybody, to close the rift. I did a video on that series. It's a really good story. Like, it's really good. I guess I'll put that in the description if you wanna watch that. So he believes she's dead. So and then we have Inferno, where demons kind of push Maddie over the edge, and she turns into the Goblin Queen. And then Apocalypse, he infects Nathan, unfortunately, with a techno-organic virus. In order to save his life, they transport, or they send him into the future. So, let's see, and that's then about the time when the new X-Men formed, Uncanny X-Men 281 and X-Men 1, and Cyclops is the field commander of the blue team. And during this time, Psylocke, she like flirts hard with him, and he kind of just lets her. Like, he never shuts her down and says, "Hey, I'm with Jean." Like, when she's in the famous Pikachu swimsuit, he stares at her hard. She at one point licks blood off of his face. She kisses him anyway, and Psylocke antagonizes Jean. Like I said, Cyclops does nothing like to shut any of this down. Like, pushes her away after any of this behavior. Is like, "Hey, I'm with Jean." Of course, I get it. I mean, she's, very exotic and gorgeous, but at the same time, if he's with Jean, he should be like, "Hey, I'm with Jean." I'm with Jean. So he doesn't do that. Anyway, so Jean has to kind of like psychically remind him that it's one of the times, like when he's looking at her in the swimsuit, she kind of has to shoot him like a little telepathic bolt to be like, "Hello, are you even paying attention to what I'm saying?" So anyway, so after, let's see, and then that is and then we have to deal with the Onslaught, of course. And and X Factor, they're only there till issue 70, and then the other X Factor team, led by his brother Havoc, takes over. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. So anyway, Onslaught, and then Operation Zero Tolerance, which they touched on in X-Men 97, which I also did a video series on that, because it's different than the X-Men 97, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, we won't go to X-Men 97 because otherwise this video will be like 20 minutes longer than it needs to be. So, and actually at that point, Scott and Jean retire from the X-Men because during Operation Zero Tolerance, Cyclops has a bomb placed in his chest. I mean, crazy stuff. So they retire. They're like, I'm done. And then we have Apocalypse gathering the 12, and that was a crazy story. By gathering these 12 specific mutants, and I'm not going to go into the story because, like I said, I'm trying to make this video not as long as the Iceman video, but while still hitting all the highlights. In order to gather all these mutants, he would turn, basically invincible. And Cyclops sacrifices himself to merge with Apocalypse so that he doesn't merge with Nate Gray. And basically, the X-Men think that Cyclops has, at that point, died, essentially. But they find out, no, he's actually alive and still in there. And so Cable and Jean were able to expel Apocalypse from Cyclops, killing him. But of course, I mean, I don't blame him at this point. But he feels different, like way different. Jean, at that point, her powers have come back. And of course, the professor's gone because after Onslaught, he's like put in prison. I mean, for the safety of everybody, basically. So Jean's running the school since Cyclops is in no shape too. And he kind of tries to talk to Jean about it, but really, he doesn't try that hard. So basically he seeks comfort somewhere else and goes to Emma. And they don't have like a actual literal affair. They have like a psychic affair. Oh, and so Jean, confronts them both, and she's not happy, and Scott is not happy that Jean confronted them in that matter. And so he leaves. And when he comes back, like right around that time, Zorn, who was supposedly Magneto, but then they reconned it to be an imposter. He kills Jean, and Scott feels really bad at that point. And Jean's like, "Don't feel bad, just live your life." Especially because, and like future Jean, a little confusing. Future Jean, who has full control of the Phoenix powers in the white hot room, or the white something room. Sorry, I'm drawing a blank. She actually reaches out and convinces Cyclops, kind of pushes him psychically to stay, because if he leaves, then there's like some kind of apocalyptic event that will take place. Like apocalyptic, like timeline, future, stuff. So she convinces him to stay. Um, and at that point, we move into like Astonishing X-Men, which a lot is revealed about Xavier that Cyclops is not happy with. Like, he knew all along, apparently, that Danger was part of the Danger Room. Like, it was a sentient like being that Xavier essentially trapped and said, "No, you're going to be in charge of the Danger Room. Like, that's your whole purpose. Like, you're trapped here." And he also knew about Vulcan and didn't the third Summers brother, because Cyclops' mom was pregnant at the time when they were on the plane and supposedly crashed. They didn't obviously they didn't crash. They went before to Ken, but anyway. So she was pregnant, and that's the third Summers brother, of course, because it was rumored that it was going to be Gambit. But when Gambit was introduced, everyone just like immediately was like, "Oh, that's supposedly the long lost Summers brother," because of his eyes. So they changed it to not be Gambit, since everyone was like, "That's so obvious." So anyway, okay, yeah, he was mad that Xavier knew about Vulcan and didn't tell him. And then we have, of course, M Day that happened, and all the mutants' population is reduced to just like 198. And there's rumors of a baby who's going to be like the messiah of mutants, the savior. That's Hope Summers. Um, and then the baby ends up going with Cable into the future for their own safety. And then in San Francisco, they save the city. And so the mayor's like, "Hey, you're welcome to stay here. You can form your little city here." And so they form a kind of a utopia, invite all mutants to stay there. But unfortunately, Cyclops starts keeping secrets from Emma. I mean, granted, no one liked the pairing in the beginning, but they all, kind of got used to it and were like, okay, whatever. So he started keeping secrets from her. He formed like a Black Ops X-Men team to deal with stuff that, he didn't want anyone else to know about, and Wolverine was in charge of it. And so that was driving a wedge between them, because Emma knew he was keeping secrets, but like she kind of even looked in his mind, and there was just like this black box that she couldn't access. So she started kind of keeping her own secret and joined Norman Osborn's like black team, like Black Ops team that he had. And so, in order to protect mutant interests, because he had become, at this point, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., but it wasn't called S.H.I.E.L.D. that time. At that time, it was like called Hammer, but it was still like S.H.I.E.L.D. type organization. So they were both keeping secrets from each other. So, let's see. Oh, and Maddie pops up at one point, and she's kind of like a ghost. And so she tries to reclaim Jean's body, because Jean's body is the only one that can actually, like, would work for her, to be resurrected in. And so they switch Jean's body, like, they dig up her grave and switch her body so that when Maddie goes into her, the body, she, like, basically disintegrates. So basically, okay, another reason why I don't like Cyclops is, he kind of makes a lot of questionable decisions at this point. the writers have him make these, questionable decisions. Like, he tells Oya, well, that's what she's going by now, tells her that, yeah, it's okay to kill all these, like, Hellfire Club members and stuff like that. No big deal. I mean, granted, it was to save people, but like save her teammates and stuff. But I feel like the old Cyclops would not be just like, oh, like so laissez-faire about just killing a bunch of people. Like, oh, no big deal, just whatever. And he also, when Hope comes back with like these other new mutants, they're called Five Lights because they represent the like the hope of mutant kind. So when they come back, he's like, oh yeah, it's fine for you guys to fight on the front lines, no big deal. And Wolverine, he doesn't agree with that. He doesn't agree with kids being like on the front lines. And so but Cyclops argues that, hey, if they want to fight, they are allowed to fight. It's their fight too. Which is so funny because in the newest Uncanny X-Men series, when the, Raid on Grey Malkin Lane story crossover happened between his X-Men team and Rogue's, he was chastising Rogue and saying, kids, Rogue, really? When that's exactly what he did, in during Utopia. So, interesting. And then she comes back, well, at least I don't have Magneto on my team. Anyway. Okay, so he and Wolverine fight because Wolverine does not agree with his methods. And Beast also doesn't agree with his methods, and basically he leaves. So Wolverine leaves, Rogue leaves, they go and actually start Jean Grey's school for the gifted because, they don't trust Cyclops' vision anymore. They don't feel like he has everyone's best interest at heart. So, and then A versus X happens, which makes Cyclops even more unlikable. Which, oh, goodness. Okay. So, the Phoenix Force comes back, and the Avengers are scared, and other people are scared that the Phoenix Force will, destroy everybody. Because look what happened the last time the Phoenix Force was there. So the Phoenix Force comes to basically claim Hope as its host. So, and the Avengers and the X-Men battle, they fight, and the Phoenix Force ends up being scattered between 5 members. Emma, Cyclops, Namor, Magic, Colossus, I think. Ooh, okay. I'm not sure about the Colossus. Man, it's been a while since I've read that story. Anyway, so they end up using their powers, at first of the Phoenix Force for good, but then, of course, that power corrupts them because it's, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So, and Cyclops kind of is driven off the deep end because he actually attacks Emma, steals her portion of the Phoenix Force, kills Xavier when he's like, hey, tries to talk, Cyclops and the rest of the Phoenix Force members down, saying, hey, this is not right. This is not what we should be doing, because they, like I said, start doing good, and then they start, becoming like controlling, and basically everyone has to follow their rules and has to do it their way, and, dictatorship sort of thing. So, yeah, don't like that either, that he actually, for one, attacked Emma, stole her powers, her portion, and then killed Xavier. I mean, granted, he hasn't always agreed with Xavier, and I get that, but killing, I feel like, is never the answer. So, yeah, wasn't a fan of that either. And then he went to prison. And in prison, he met a mutant named Jake, and they kind of formed a bond. And these other, Dazzler got back in the window, sorry. These other prisoners kill Jake, and Cyclops, that makes him really mad. And so he has Magic transport the killers to Limbo. he scars the warden, like he has danger, disfigure the warden. And then he started like killing police officers and government officials for trying for arresting mutants and trying to like enforce the law and all this stuff. And just he goes off the deep end basically. Like I said, not like I'm not a fan. And then Beast has this great idea because he has seen that Cyclops has gone off the deep end. He has this great idea to bring the X-Men back from when they were young, back from like, I forgot I still had this on the table because I used it for Iceman, back from in this day, when they're teenagers. So he brings them back, and young Scott is pretty disgusted by what he sees. Like he doesn't want that to be his legacy, so he's not happy. So when the Inhumans versus mutants thing happens, Cyclops is killed by the Terrigen Mist. So then when he's resurrected, he kind of takes a good hard look at his life and realizes that he, was just as bad as the bad guys that he protested against before. So he kind of, decided to change his ways. And, of course, Krakoa, and then he was Captain Krakoa because, they didn't want anyone to know about the resurrection protocols. And then after what happened with Xavier seemingly killing all those people, which he didn't really, I've talked about that before, in the raid on Grey Malkin Lane story. So, of course, Cyclops is disillusioned with Xavier, and he, forms his own team. And that's where we are now. Oh, that's actually, like, barely less time than the Iceman video. Granted, though, I did talk about Abomination for a couple minutes, so I still say I did pretty good. So I hope you will join me for the next video, and until next time, bye.